So how did they run the study? They had a study with 18 psychopaths and 38 non-psychopath prisoners who committed murder. They were visited by the UBC researchers in the prison. And they conducted interviews that they converted to text transcripts. They fed that text into automatic analysis programs, and they looked for those features that we just went over, controlling for the age of the participants, the time that they were in prison, the time that had passed since the murderers, and that allowed them to look more closely at just the language differences between psychopaths and non-psychopaths. Let's look at the results of their language analysis. First, as they predicted, more past tense and less present tense was found in the language of the psychopaths compared to the non-psychopaths. And this supports their hypothesis and suggests psychological distancing and minimizing of the effect of the murders, the effect that continues to this day. Instead, they talk about the killing as in the past more, done and gone. By comparison, non-psychopaths, they were more likely to talk about their killings in the present tense, indicating that they seem to still be affected by them. And those findings about temporal distancing were controlling for the time in prison and the time since the murder. Next, they found that psychopaths had more disfluency relative to non-psychopaths, as they predicted. Third, they also found that psychopaths use fewer intense emotional words relative to non-psychopaths, and they predicted this as well. So this indicated that emotionality was flatter for people higher in psychopathy. Next, they did find that psychopaths use more causal language in the description of the murder events, like because and since. And this was predicted and suggests that the prisoners understood the event as a means to an end. There was an acceptable reason for the murder, potentially. It suggests instrumental violence rather than reactive violence, which is more likely in non-psychopaths. Reactive violence is associated with thinking about murder as having been committed for no good reason, without an explanation that can be conjured or called upon. And in fact, non-psychopaths, when describing the murders, they use fewer causal connective words. The psychopaths not only were more likely to attempt to explain away their murders using causal language, they also talked significantly more about low-level needs, as the researchers had predicted. For example, what they ate that day, or what they drank that day, or money that was involved. Whereas non-psychopaths, they talk more about higher level needs and issues related to family, religion, and spirituality. There's an interesting video of Dr. Hancock giving the rundown of these findings on YouTube if you're interested. In sum, psychopath speech relative to their counterparts used more past tense, less present tense, indicating a detachment from their murder event. The speech had more disfluency and less emotionality, so more, it was flatter in affect. Their speech used more rational cause and effect words, like because, in attempts to form explanations. And their speech was more focused on low-level material needs, food, drink, money, rather than higher-level social needs like family and religion. So let's look closer at this finding about needs. Hancock and colleagues proposed that psychopaths reference these material needs more than social and psychological needs because psychopaths narcissistically think those higher level needs are satisfied. and material needs are all that are worth pursuing. Another possibility is that they're unable to value those needs because they can't comprehend the abstract terms that convey them. This might reflect reduced abstract processing ability in psychopaths. Could this explain the finding? So we can now look at abstract processing ability in this question. Psychopaths focus on material versus social psychological needs. Does it reflect narcissism or reduced abstract processing ability? For example, basic material needs are concrete and can be pictured. We need cash, bed, a house, car, a drink, a sandwich. Self-actualization, which seems to be avoided in the speech of psychopaths, is described with terms that are 100% abstract, like forever, real, true, authentic, commitment, faithful, right and wrong. These also make up the substance of most people's moral values and traits, incidentally. So to look into this possibility that there's an abstract processing disability in people with psychopathy, Kent Keel examined abstract language processing in psychopaths and non-psychopaths using neuroscience tools. He started on this by noting that psychopaths seem to have a difficulty with metaphor. They seem to not be getting abstract language, he thought. He decided to investigate whether psychopathy was linked to a difficulty making sense of abstract terms and how they refer to concepts differently from concrete terms. Keel's hypothesis was that psychopaths only understand ideas in concrete, not abstract terms. So that would translate neurally to no differentiation in neural patterns as they read the two different kinds of words, concrete versus abstract. The method that Keel used to investigate this was to monitor neural responses or electrical activity associated with stimulus events, ERPs, event-related potentials, with EEG or electroencephalogram monitoring. The task involved exposing participants to concrete and abstract words, matched for frequency, so how often they're used in speaking, in writing, and emotionality, their valence. And this set of words was used with a lexical decision task for the participants. And in this task, participants need to quickly identify whether a bunch of letters on a screen is a word or a non-word. And he was interested in the pairing of concrete words, like potato, and pseudo words like Carollo, and abstract words like pride, and pseudo words like Rosola. Normally, people are quicker to identify concrete words compared to abstract words. And this occurs at a very particular time point in the course of language processing, early on at about 175 milliseconds. So concrete word stimuli are typically processed much more efficiently than abstract word stimuli. So concrete terms are processed faster than abstract terms. So typically the brain is distinguishing between abstract and concrete terms. And this is traceable in EEG results at around 175 milliseconds in the time course after the presentation of the word stimulus. Psychopaths did not show divergences for processing between concrete and abstract words in any of the locations on the scalp where non-psychopaths did. So if you look here, you can see circled in orange and in the black lines, they were processing the terms similarly. Psychopaths were processing the terms the concrete and abstract terms quite similarly, whereas the non-psychopathic and healthy people in their study showed a divergent brainwave pattern for abstract versus concrete terms. And you can see that gap circled in green up there. Keel concludes that this is evidence that shows that psychopaths are impaired in the processing of abstract terms. They did not show the typical divergence for processing between concrete and abstract words.